I think a lot of it is legitimate. The state's in very bad shape financially right now, and that translates into lower budgets for the school.
Well, I think there's truth to that statement because there is a budget crisis going on at the state level, and so school districts do have significantly less money, and so that's definitely part of the problem.
Well, I think in today's budget situation that there are extreme cuts that have to be made at local levels because there are millions of dollars less available to schools than there were in previous budgets. I think the school boards are doing the best they can in the current situation, making tough decisions. That being said, I don't always agree with the decisions that they make, but I think the decisions of cutting programs, funding certain programs over other programs, at times are necessary and at other times are very political. I think that what gets lost in the shuffle oftentimes is what's best, or what's in the best interest of students. While extracurricular programs, sports, and other things are very important, the most important thing that we are here to do is to educate and prepare students for college. I think that by allowing all of the extracurricular programs to remain at Logan while closing the library, we're sending a strong message. And the message is not the one we want to send to students, that libraries and reading are not as important as sports or forensics or bands or things like that. When you can afford to hire multiple football coaches, multiple people in the band, multiple coaches of all levels, you have to have a way to keep a library open. It took the donation of an individual anonymous donor of $60,000 to keep our library, or to reopen our library after they decided to close it. And I think that was the worst message a school could send to its students, to its community, to the state, and to anyone else who hears that message. I think that was a tragedy.
The No Child Left Behind Act was enacted in 2001 during the Bush administration, and it was designed to ensure that students continue to improve in achievement.
And its intention is good, that it wants to improve education and have a quantifiable way to measure performance and improvement. But I don't think that it makes education better.
States individually were supposed to set standards as to how schools would progress.
The idea was that we would make sure that every child was educated by having a series of tests that showed improvement at each school.
A problem, a criticism of it was that schools were supposed to perpetually improve, and if they did not improve, then they would be labeled as in need of improvement and might ultimately be placed in a category that would be taken over by the state.
Unfortunately, there's really no good way to test students and have that lead to an understanding of what they're learning or what they're not learning. What that leads to, especially at the high school level, is the students not taking the test seriously. What that does is it skews the data to make it look like students are not learning when in fact maybe they are. And also the tests fall 2 months prior to the end of the school year, and my students are tested on information that we have not covered yet, which is another huge flaw in the system. So the No Child Left Behind, why it sounds good, if you really break it down and look at it, it's a horrendously flawed system that needs to be completely abandoned, and we need to start fresh with something else. No Child Left Behind has been a failed experiment.
Well, Prop 30 is really important for schools because it's going to prevent more cuts from happening in districts throughout the state.
Well, Proposition 30 is designed to reinfuse money into schools that have had drastic cuts. Our own school district, I don't know the exact figures off the top of my head, but I think it's $7 or $9 million that we're operating with less than we were prior to the budget crunch situation a few years back. So Proposition 30 will add a quarter-cent sales tax to everyone, and it will tax individuals making over $250,000 or couples making over $500,000, which are people that can frankly afford to pay a little more to make sure that education is taken care of in our state, to make sure that we're doing a good job educating all of the people of our state, and to make sure that the next generation has a chance at succeeding and fulfilling the American dream. Times that are when there's less money, it's really difficult to make these decisions. To not allow more budget cuts, I think we need to make better decisions as a state. I think a huge benefit would be if we overturned Proposition 13 for corporations. I think by overturning Proposition 13 for corporations, what that would do is it would raise revenues in the state and allow more funding for schools and other social programs. I think that we're spending too much money on retirement for certain people. Police officers, prison guards are able to retire after 20 years. I realize it's a tough job. I realize it's a dangerous job. It's not a job that I would want to have. But at the same time, if someone starts as a prison guard or a police officer at 22, they can retire at 42 and then work in another capacity. I think that double dipping in retirement is extremely harmful to our state.
I think the state needs to be responsible and needs to plan for rainy day and needs to exercise restraint and adequate forethought when planning its long-term budgets to prevent these kinds of crises from happening in the future. I also think that the state needs to investigate other sources of revenue that are more stable and not as subject to variation as things like property taxes and things of that nature.
The true fix or remedy for our budget crisis right now is the economy improving. You know, more people have to be employed so that there are fewer people receiving benefits and more people paying tax revenue. And then the state will have more money and schools will have more money. So that is the ultimate remedy. But as far as kind of like quick, gimmicky like things to solve the budget, there's really no easy way to solve it, because anything that would aim to help would be something really temporary, and just the size of the problem is so large that it would take something very large to improve it.
By looking really closely at benefits and retirements and things like that in the state of California, that we could get the budget back closer to what it needs to be, and we could fund schools adequately.